Hello guys, welcome to Tech Vitals. Today we are going to learn about the permissions in Linux. And if you remember, when we began to learn the basic command lines in Linux, we started from the command ls, and while learning the ls, we used the command ls minus lh, and we mentioned that the first section of this output is the permissions of the files or the directories, and today we are going to dive into this part. So here this dash represents that it's a file, and D represents that this is the directory, and after D or dash you can see there are RWX, where there are just RW, where there are just R, where there is just X. So here R, W and X, they are the permissions. R represents read or readable, write represents writable, and X represents executable. And within this first section, the first three sections is for the owner of the file or directory, or the user who created that folder or file. The middle three section is for the permissions of the group, and the last three section is for the other users. So the first section is for the owner or the creator of the file. The middle section is for the group. Group means all the users who are allocated in that group, and the last three is the permission for the remaining other users. So let's clear the screen first. When we talk about the permissions, you have to keep in mind the lucky number 7, and the number 7 here means the file is readable, writable and executable. So whenever we allocate the number 7 to any file or the directory, we are allowing all the operations. They are read, write and execute for that specific file or directory. Now let's talk about how did we derive the number 7. So here the three permissions we have are read, write and execute. Read is indicated by the letter R, write is represented with letter W, and the execute is represented with the letter X. And all of these permissions have their own value. They include various octal number. So the octal number or the value for read permission is 4. The value for the write permission is 2, and the value for the execute permission is 1. And when we add 4, 2 and 1, we get the lucky number 7. So that's how we derived this 7 number, and the 7 number means that the file is readable, the file is writable and the file is executable. Now if we allocate a file with the number 4, then that means the file is readable only, because it has the value of 4, and 4 is the value for the read, so that file will be readable only. Now let's say if we allocate the number 3 to a file, then let's first determine how can we derive the number 3. So the read has value 4 and the number 3 is less than 4, so that means we cannot derive 3 from the read permission because it has the value 4. The write has value 2. So write can be derived because 3 is greater than 2 and 1 is also less than 3. So that means by adding 2 and 1 we can derive the number 3. Hence, if we give the value 3 to a file, then that means the file is writable and executable, but the file is not readable. Okay, now what about the value 5? So 4 is less than 5. That means yes, we can allow the read permission for that file. And here we have 2. So when we add 4 and 2, then we get the output of 6, which is greater than 5. So we cannot derive the number 5 by adding this 4 and 2. But by adding this 4 and 1, we can derive the number 5. So that means if we allocate the number 5 to a file, the file is readable and executable, but the file is not writable. And when we give the value of 6 to a file, then how can we derive the number 6? By adding 4 and 2, right? So that means the file is readable and writable, but not executable. And we started from the number 7. So how can we derive the number 7? By adding all of these octal numbers, right? 4 plus 2 plus 1 is 7. So that means when we allocate the number 7 to a file or a directory, that means that file or the directory is readable, writable, and executable. So we cannot give the value less than 1 or greater than 7. So the value must be from 1 to 7. 1 means it's just executable, 2 means it's just writable, 3 means it's writable and executable, 4 means it's just readable, 5 means it's readable and executable, 6 means it's readable and writable, and the 7 means it is permitted for every operations, that is readable, writable, and executable. Now let's see some of the examples. First, let's create a directory named permissions. Let's go inside the permissions. And now let's create a new file using cat and a redirection. New file, the txt, and let's type some texts. Welcome to the lesson of permissions. And now let's save it. And if we see what contents are inside the new file, the text, we have this welcome to the lesson of permissions. And now if we type ls minus lh, then here is the permissions for the new file, the text. And as I mentioned, this first 3 section is for the owner or the creator of the file. So as you can see, we are logged in as root user and we created this file as the root user. So the owner of this file is root. You can also see it here. This is the owner. So the root is the owner. And this middle 3 section is the permission for the group, and the group of the root user is root itself. The second root is the group. So the user is also root and the group is root as well. And the last 3 section is for the other users. So this permission is applied to all the users in this system besides the root user. If we go to the home directory and type ls, so these three are the users in this system beside the root. So we have James, John and Paul. So this permission is applied to all these three users. And now let's talk about what permissions are there. So the first section, that is for the root. For the root user, this new file, the text is readable and writable. You can see RW there, and there is no X in that section. So RW means it's readable and writable for the root user, because this 3 section is for the root. And now if we talk about this middle 3 sections, it has just R in there. R means just readable, and that permission is for the group, that is root. So for all the users that are in the group root, they can just read the file. And the last section is for the other users. That means for these 3 users, James, John and Paul, these 3 users can only read this new file, the text. Okay, now let's try to make some changes in this new file, the text, with the user John. So let's switch user with John. Now we are logged in as John, and we have this new file, the text. Since the other users can only read this file, we can read the new file, the text. But now let's try to edit this file using the vi command. Here we are inside the new file, the text, in the vi screen, and here you can see it says the read only, because the other users has the permission to read the file only. So if we try to edit something here by using the insert mode, then we are in the insert mode, but here's the warning saying changing a read-only file. So let's try to make some changes, and now let's try to save it. And as you can see, it says read only, so we cannot write into this file. Now let's quit. So the content of the file is unchanged. So what if we want other users to give the permission to write in this file? To give the other users the permission to write, we have to make changes in this section, because this section is for the permission for the other users. So we have to make it RW instead of just R. So to do that, we have to log in as root again. So let's log in as root, and let's go to the permissions. So for now, other users can only read the file. To change that permission, we have to use the command chmod, and then we have to give the value. So this first section, it's for the owner, and it is set as RW, that is readable and writable. So the read has the value of 4 and W has the value of 2, and we don't have X or execute here, so RW together has the value of 6, that is 4 plus 2. So we are not going to change anything for this section, so let's leave it as 6. And this middle section is for the group, and for the group the permission is read only, and the read has the value of 4, so we are also going to leave it as 4. But this one, the last section, it's for the other users, and we want to make change in this section. We want to give the permissions to other users so that they can write or make changes in the file. So we have to make it rw. R has the value of 4 and W has the value of 2. So together we have to give the value of 6, that is 4 plus 2. So 646. The first 6 here is for the owner, and 6 means readable and writable. So the owner can read and write the file. This 4 is for the group, that is the users of that group can only read the file. And this 6 at the last is for the other users, and 6 means read and write. So the other users can read and write the file. And then we have to mention the file name, that is new file.txt. Okay, now if we see the list, then now you can see this section has changed into RW. Earlier it was just R, but now it's RW. That means the other users can write or make changes in this new file.txt. So let's again switch user as John, and when we try to write something in new file.txt using the John user, it didn't let us to make changes. It said the file is read only. But now since we have changed the permissions for other users, we should be able to write in this file or make changes in this file. So let's try using vi new file.txt, and let's go to insert mode by pressing I, and let's add some new texts. I am writing with the user John. And now let's press the escape and try to save it using :wq. Okay, so now it didn't give us any warning. So that means we have successfully made changes in this new file.txt, and we can verify that using the cat command. And here is the new line that we just added. And since the file is now writable by other users, we can also make changes with some other users other than the John. So we have James and Paul, so we can also log in with those users and make some changes. So now let's try to make change with the user Paul. And if we type vi new file.txt and try to insert, I am writing with the user Paul, and now let's save it. So as you can see, we also made changes with the user Paul. Now let's log in as the root again. Let's go to that permissions. Now we just made changes in this last section, that is for the other users. But if you want, you can also make changes in first and the middle sections. So this is for the owner, and the owner can read and write the file. And now let's add execute permission in this section, and the group is permitted to read only. So let's allow the group members to write on the file. So for this section we are going to make it read, write and execute, and for this second section we are going to make read and write. So using the same command chmod, to make it read, write and execute, we have to give the full value, that is 4 plus 2 plus 1, that is 7. And right now it's only readable, that means it has the value of 4. But if we want to add write permission in this section, we have to make it RW, and we can get the RW with the value of 6, and then let's leave it as it is. So it's RW, that means it's 6, and type the file name. And now the owner is permitted to read, write and execute the file. The group is permitted to read and write, and other users are also permitted to read and write this new file, the text. And here you can see this is the owner of this file. So root is the owner of the new file, the text. We can also change the owner of the file. So right now the root is the owner, but now let's make the Paul the owner of this new file, the text. To change the owner, we use the command chown, and then we have to give the attribute capital R, and then the new owner. So we are going to make Paul new owner, and then the name of the file, new file, the text. Okay, now if we check the list again, now here you can see the owner of the file is Paul. Earlier it was root, but now it's Paul. So this RWX is going to apply for the Paul because Paul is the owner. And since the group of this file is root, so the middle section, read and write, is going to apply for the group members of the root group. But we can also change the group of this new file, the text. So first let's create a new group using group add command, and let's give it a name of HR. So we just added the new group HR, and let's add the user John in this group using user mod A capital G, the group name HR, and the user John. If we check the ID of John, then the primary group of John is John itself, and the secondary groups of the user John are tech and HR. So the user John is the member of two groups, tech and HR. Right now the group for this new file, the text, is root. So now let's change the group into HR for this new file, the text, and for that we use the same command chown and the -r attribute. Then we have to add this colon sign, and then the new group, that is HR, and the file name, that is new file, the text. And now if we check the ls, then the group for this new file, the text, is HR. So in the beginning the user for this new file, the text, was root, but now the user is Paul, and the group for new file, the text, was root, and now the group is HR. So this second section is going to apply for this HR group. So all the members of HR group can read and write. Now let's do some experiments. So we have given the permissions to other users to read and write on this new file, the text, but now let's change it. Now let's make it just readable to other users by using the command chmod 7, 6 and 4 and the file name. Now the other users can only read the file. So now let's make a new user add AD. Now let's change to AD. Okay, so we just created this new user AD, and since other users are permitted to read only the new file.txt, we cannot edit this new file, or we cannot write anything in this new file.txt. So AD is the new user, and if we try to make some changes in new file.txt using the insert, it will give us the warning that changing a read-only file. So if you type anything and try to save it, then it will reply that it's read-only, so we cannot make any changes. But we have given the permission to this HR group to read and write in the new file.txt. So if we add the AD into this HR group, then AD should be able to write in this new file.txt. So let's allocate the HR group to the user AD. User mod -a capital G HR AD. Okay, we don't have the permission to allocate the group, so we have to first log in as root, and now we can allocate the group HR to AD. So if we check the ID for AD, then now AD is in the HR group. So let's switch back to AD again. Okay, so earlier when we tried to edit this new file.txt using the user AD, we were not permitted to do so, but now we have added the AD in HR group, and the HR group is permitted to read and write in the file. Now the AD should be able to write in the new file. So let's first go to permissions. Okay, so to go inside permission, we have to first log in as a root and go to permissions, and then only we can switch user. Okay, now AD is inside permissions directory, and now if we try to make change in the new file.txt, it should give us the permission, because now we are the member of HR. And let's try to save. We didn't get any error, so that means we added that text in the new file. We can verify that using the cat command, and here we just made changes in that new file with the user AD. Let's clear the screen first, and we saw the example for other users and the group. Now let's see the example for the user or the owner itself. So the owner for this new file.txt is Paul, and we have given all the permissions to Paul, that is read, write and execute. So the Paul can read the file, write into the file and execute that file. So what if we permit the owner to read only the file? So let's switch to Paul, and let's edit that permission chmod, and we are making changes in this first section. So we are going to make it read only, and the octal number for read is 4, so we have to give 4. We are not going to make any changes in this second, so we have to give it 6, and we are also not going to change this last section, so we are going to give it 4, and the file name. And now you can see this first section has read-only permission. That means Paul cannot write into the new file.txt. So let's try to edit this text. Let's go to insert and let's type I am writing with the user Paul again, and you can see the warning here. So if you try to save it, then we will be denied to write in this new file.txt. So let's quit the VI. So we did lots of stuffs in this video, and you must be in some confusion right now because it's been a long video. So what I suggest you is to watch the video one more time, and then you might get the clear idea of what we just did in this video. And in this lesson, we learned about the permissions of the files and directories. We learned how to change this permission section for user, group, and other users. We learned to change the owner of the file, and we also learned to change the group of the file, and how we can edit the permissions for the owner, group, and other users for a particular file. And it's really important to understand this concept because it is related with the security of the files and directories in our system. I'd like to thank you for watching, and if you have any questions or confusion, you can comment down below, and I will see you soon with the next video. Till then, keep learning. Goodbye.